Okay, so let me introduce our three guests for this afternoon. And what I wanted to specifically for this session was primary, secondary, special. Primary, Julie Rees is a long-time associate and a really dear friend who leads a values education-based school in Ledbury, amongst many other things that she does. Every associate that I send to her, or that we send to her school to say, go and see what Julie's doing, they come out in tears because it's so moving and so powerful the way that she works with young people in what is quite a challenging area in dealing with issues around rural poverty and all sorts of things. So I really wanted Julie's view on this. And Julie and I have had a few conversations about going back and about what's important and what do we do first. Andy Greenhough is a new friend. Dave Harris, who many of you know, who is an associate director. He was involved in one of the sessions this morning around leadership and brave heads. He suggested that Andy would be a good secondary head to talk to about this. Andy is, because Andy was a deputy to Dave when Dave was working in inner city Nottingham. And Andy is the head teacher at Ralph Allen School in Bath. And we're really pleased to make your acquaintance and to hear a little bit more about what's going on with you down there. And then there's Dave Whitaker, who hopefully many of you know. When you type Dave Whitaker into Google, I noticed yesterday that, you know, when it comes up with a list of suggestions, the first one it comes up with is Dave Whitaker kindness, which I think is that's a powerful thing to. After that, it's tractors, but I don't think that might be difficult.
Say that.
But yeah, but Dave Whitaker kindness. If Google's going to record you for posterity or something, I think that, and that's linked to I think it was a Guardian article or a Times Ed article about the work that you're doing as you're director of learning now across Wellspring Academy Trust. Series of special schools, PRUs, AP, alternative provision schools, with a real focus on kindness. So welcome to the three of you. It's sort of where to start now. Let's just work our way through what have been your biggest challenges over the last few weeks, and now rather looking forward, what's been the hardest thing to have hit you so far, and how did you deal with that? Julie, do you want to go first?
Hello and welcome to Andy and Dave as well. I think the hardest challenge has been keeping up with what the government have thrown out at us as head teachers. It's bank holiday weekend, and at 2:30 yesterday afternoon the EYFS guidance came out for us to try and implement this on June the 1st. And that's been the hardest challenge from the top. But alongside that, it's reaching out to our children to make sure that those vulnerable children are totally safe. We've done that incredibly well at our school. We've had a wellbeing team of 6 people who've been on that constantly with phone calls and visits, doorstep visits, and making sure that they've got the free school meal vouchers. So that would be the second thing. And then the third thing is trying to make learning equitable for all. That's been hard because some people have access to computers and online learning, and some of our parents have just a mobile phone between 6 children who are all trying to access different online platforms at the same time. So those have been my top 3 challenges.
Yeah, okay, all right, thank you. Andy, same question for you.
Yeah, I think a lot of what Julie says as well, and prior to the last couple of weeks, that divide is a huge thing. And it's about, we try to get consistency in our own schools anyway. And imagine now that consistency has gone into 1,000 homes, and from the internet, from what the computers, from the parental support, that is the big worrying thing I have to work with. Just recently again about that forcing back into schools, and I think if your values are you agree with this and it can be doing and it's straightforward, then I think that's an easy decision. If you think about the safety of your staff and your students, and you don't quite agree, then there's pressure for you to do it. I found that has been quite hard as well. If I agree with the things that are happening, that's always a much more straightforward thing to do. But I think that has made, you can't see it, but it is going grey from the last 2 weeks, and that's been very hard. And it's working with the whole community. If you ever needed a reminder about what a school does for a community, I think this period has done it, because the amount of people that email you, talk to you about these things that happen, And all those soft little things that happen in school are just missed. And then that's why everyone's feeling this way. And, you know, a teacher or a member of staff could just do it with a smile or a little morning, and all that's missing. And I think the ethos, the culture of schools helps children into the routines, what they do, and parents are struggling with that. You know, the child gets up at 9:30, I don't look forward to doing any work, I want to argue with you, and their relationships become strained and tensed. So then they come to us, and how can you do it? And it's trying to balance all that and support through this. So there's probably about 43 things here, but yeah, it's been not be straightforward.
You mentioned values, and it's interesting because the conversation around bravery and leadership this morning with Dave Harris, and also Floyd Woodrow, who's got a background in the SAS amongst other things, and then also on restorative approaches with Mark Finnis, and then the guy called Simon Flowers, who's the head of Carr Manor School in Leeds. It's so values came back time and time again when it came to thinking about leadership, and this idea of being in a situation where what you're asked to do is conflicting with your values.
Yeah.
How do you, as a leader, how do you deal with that?
My values win. So when you got to come down to it, and I think what it helps do, it helps clarify and it helps polarize where you come from. And yeah, there are people around you that you just got to say, I'm totally disagreeing with this. You know, am I right? What do you think? And obviously, you know, I'm not a Brian Clough, and their opinion will be the same as mine when I've talked to them a while. You have to judge it right. But I think overall, you have to go with who you are and what's put you in this position now. So, yeah, difficult, but yeah, I tend to win on my values.
Okay. And well, we talked as well earlier about intuition as well. So that's this idea about going with who you are and what you feel is right is important. Dave Whitaker, what are the challenges? How mad has your life been in the last few months?
I'm just lucky because I'm working with a lot of really good people and leaders who are fairly level-headed, and I think that one of the things that we said right from the start of this, we sort of adopted a phrase which was really sort of to be, let's try and be calm and purposeful through it all. So let's be really, really measured. Let's look at what we can do and what we're able to do. Let's not be forced into anything that we don't think is doable. Yeah, we've got guidance, and we're quite happy to look at the guidance. All 41 different changes that's happened in the guidance in the last couple of weeks, which is just crazy. And if you can imagine, coming from a special and alternative background, what tends to happen when you get guidance, it tends to be for mainstream, and then somewhere hidden somewhere in it, there's the odd line that changes for special education and mainstream. And you know, even from that first day when schools closed, when they didn't, but when schools closed, they closed to everybody apart from vulnerable children and children with EHCPs, which is everybody in every one of the schools. So if you were going to take the guidance as as read, then there wouldn't be a special school in the land that would have not operated this following Monday with the same number of children. So the hardest thing for me really has been managing stakeholder expectations, and I think that because of the media and because the way that the media ebbs and flows, everybody gets scared. Staff get scared, parents get scared, local authorities get scared, and everybody's actually genuinely wanting to do the right thing, but they don't know what the right thing is. And so that's left to the school leaders to try and plot the way through that and work the way through that challenge, and keep the challenge as being keeping everybody happy and being confident enough to do so. So one of the things that really, the way that we've worked through that challenge is to say, you mentioned it earlier about sticking to your gut and your instinct. You know your own community, you know your own schools, and you know your own children. And the other thing that's I think we probably all would agree with, that most teachers and most staff in schools genuinely want to be in schools teaching the children. And this myth that they're trying to hide is just wrong. They want to do it, and they want to do it safely, and they want to do it safely for everybody. But the problem is nobody knows how to do it safely. And I think so I don't know whether that answers your question, but the challenge has been managing expectations, I think, and working with different stakeholders in the best way we possibly can, and trying to make sure communication has been good.
Okay, thank you. Can you sort of just describe briefly what are the specific challenges that some of the children that you're working with in your schools might have met that might be out of other people's understanding or experience of what children are going through?
Well, everybody will have heard a lot around sort of the vulnerables and the challenges in the community that come with the number of vulnerable children that we've got. Well, if you can imagine in special schools, particularly in special schools, and you've got the full range of vulnerabilities. So we've got SEMH special schools where the children, to cut a long story short, they're not all that good at social distancing anyway, never mind in school. And so when they're actually, during lockdown, they're not really doing lockdown, and they're not staying in the house, and they're out and about in the communities, in the streets. And then you can imagine the anxiety then with the staff when there's a challenge for those children to come back into school, because they aren't even coming back into school from an isolated position. They're coming back into the school having been, around and about in the community. We've also got some real challenges for parents, and I've got to take my hat off to the parents as well, because the parents have worked really, really hard with their children at home in really, really challenging times. And, you've got to remember that school is respite for a lot of the parents as well. It's genuine respite, because the intensity of working with children with special educational needs and living with them and supporting them at home. And then the other thing you have to bear in mind is that some of them need specialist support. And that for a lot of those, that specialist support comes in school. So trying to find that way of getting that specialist support in the home so that the children don't have to come to school, just hugely challenging. And we could talk for hours about PPE and about contact and social distancing, and just the impossibility of doing the social distancing in a special school. And particularly, Julie will go on, I'm sure, to tell you about how do you do social distancing with little ones, but with little ones that have also got special needs, and we've got little ones as well. So we've got Key Stage 1 all the way through to Key Stage, to sixth form, post 16. So all those challenges are there, but with the increased vulnerabilities of the children. And so, it's been difficult.
So where to start, really? So going back to Julie then. So what, with regard, let's say on special needs just for now, special needs and additional needs, what has been your approach? So you're a mainstream school, but with children who are vulnerable in all sorts of ways as well, many of them, not all of them. What's been your approach?
Well, we've been fortunate in that we've run a hub from our school, for our school and the outlying schools around us, the cluster schools. And that hub has been run by somebody independently. So this has enabled my teachers to then engage with all of their children individually during the teaching. So the wellbeing group and the teachers have really worked so closely together to make sure that all the children have been engaged, but our most vulnerable children have had that extra support, those extra phone calls. They've had the work differentiated to what their needs might be, because I do have quite high end needs children in my school as well. So it has been a matter of communication. I mean, I think Dave mentioned, and Andy, communication has been absolutely key within this, and trying to keep all the staff together. We've had regular Zooms on Fridays, but I've actually brought in a program of rebalance for the staff, because the staff needed time to really explore all of these challenges. And I think SEN and vulnerable was probably the biggest one for them. How do we meet the needs of those most vulnerable children? But the feedback we've had from parents has been really positive. I'd just like to echo what Dave has said. I think the parents are absolutely remarkable in what they've achieved. And I've been very proud of our community, the way that we've communicated and made sure that every child has had access to the support and the learning that they've required.
Okay, thank you. Andy, so with regard to special needs within your school, but then also opening it out to staff needs, if you like, how have you addressed all that up to now?
The staff was the difficult thing early on, when you've got teachers who are pregnant before we've decided what's happening, saying, am I okay to come to school? And things like that. I found that a really hard thing to say, yes, but with a child. So it's getting that straight away, go and get the advice, the medical advice. And then you've got people with vulnerability, and you'll notice everyone's a mixture on this. I can go down a supermarket and there'll be people who refuse to come down the same aisle as me, and then 2 minutes later someone will reach past my head to grab a tin of soup. So even within your own communities, within your own staff body, there are people who are quite anti, I want to be as far away as possible. And people will actually come quite close, and you have to say, remember, it's 2 meters. And I had staff with illness, with respiratory illness, wanting to come in, and you're having to say, you actually can't. You know, and dealing with those was very difficult early on, and then then the decision was made to close the schools, which then changed it, which made it a lot easier. With the vulnerable students, and I echo again a bit Dave and what Julia said, and lots of people are doing extra work and the phone calls, etc. But getting them in for us has been really difficult. You know, we got a student in last week, on Wednesday, after trying for 5 weeks. And I think that was a stark message, because when the student came in, we have what's called an amber learning room, which is a room where children can go to get extra support, etc. And that worked quite well, and we got the student into the school. And then some other students were around, and then this student just sort of hid under the table, and it just brought to me the starkness about what their home environment is and how this is continuing. They're now being anti-people. And I'm sure that Dave and Julie got similar issues at the same time, but the longer this goes on without that, for some students, it's just getting further away from us.
Which has huge implications for what next, but we'll come to that. I think there's a question I wanted to put to all of you retrospectively. So this thing took everybody, it's a black swan, nobody saw it coming, nobody thought it was ever going to happen, and it did, despite government plans that they ignored last year. Looking back now over the last 3 months, and a question for each of you, before we move on, what would you have done differently? I'll start with you, Andy.
What would I do differently is I would definitely had about 14 inset days on training of video learning and Zoom with my staff before this had happened. And I think that was the hard thing, is we've got 2 days, we're closing down, we've gone and we're closed. And I know I've got teachers who, how do you turn a computer on, to, we're going to be doing live lessons in 3 weeks, etc. So I think that it is what we're going to do differently, and when we digest it in more, it will be looking about how that curriculum is integrated with online services, really, because there are parts of it that are amazing. There's no two ways about it, but it is not for everyone. I was making a chili on Saturday, and as I made this chili, and I've made it many times before, I thought, this is quite bland as what I like, but my family like that chili. It's there. And if I was making it for somebody else, then, you know, how can you make one chili that 20, 30 people like? And I came across another recipe about a year ago, where you make the mince, the tomatoes, and it's the quite bland bit, and then the other bits, the cream and the chilies, you add in. So it's like personalised chili, if you like, and it's about then they can add that to it, so you get your own taste. It's not quite right if you had a brilliant chili made just for you, but it just made me think more about is how can we make the curriculum more personalised than what we do already. And I know financial constraints are why we do certain things, and if we all designed a school from scratch without anything, it probably won't look like what we do now. But I think for me, the electronic age is here to stay, and I need to embrace it, like, you know, a lot of schools do. And how can we use this to benefit our students as much as we can?
Okay, my wife is a school principal. That's why I'm in Rotterdam, because she's here. And similar sort of thing. They've embraced the technology. They were going that way anyway, but now suddenly they've gone however many leaps and bounds ahead. And she just says it won't go back. Everything's changed. Things have changed in a good way. So looking at blended learning, looking at assessment, you're looking at putting so much stuff online so that when teachers are off, when they're off sick, there's no leaving a pile of worksheets on a desk for the supply teacher. All of that has changed because of technology. So I think we talk about what now, what changed, and what next. I think the technology has its place, although clearly there are those who are still arguing, no, it doesn't. But we'll cover that another time, I think. Julie, what would you have done differently looking back?
I think I would have reached out to our local community to sponsor more technology for our children to access. I'm really aware that, you know, I've got quite a chunk of my community who are really struggling, and there's so many fantastic online resources for the children to access. And we've relied on Facebook pages, actually, but we've made sure that there's very low-key, when I say low-key, non-online activities for the children to become engaged with. So we are reaching out to everybody, but I wish I'd have had time to get different businesses maybe to sponsor more laptops for those vulnerable families who haven't got that access at home. We have really struggled with that, and we're thinking now, how can we invest in good enough technology for our families to have at home?
Okay. All right, Dave, same question then. What would you have done differently looking back?
Something slightly different from me, really, because I've spent probably the last sort of 5 or 6 days having a real focus, trying to get some additional funding for some external funding, if you like, third-party funding, because all of a sudden we got really, really scared that we were going to have a significant NEET problem. So not in employment, education and training. And you can imagine in sort of special schools and AP, SEMH and things like that, the NEETs issue can be huge anyway. But we had this sort of realization that we've got a big bunch of kids who are going to be missing from education for 6 months essentially. And if they're in year 11, getting them engaged in post-16 education or training is going to be a real challenge, because, you know, talking about getting them dropping off the radar. So I sort of wish I'd had that realization right at the start. And hindsight's a great thing, and you don't realise how long things are going to go on for, and you might assume that these children will be back sooner than they are. But one of the things that's become a real priority over the last few weeks has been trying to get together some broader strategic thinking about what we're going to do to rescue some of these kids who what can only be described as sort of extreme NEET, and so I've just been sort of searching around as best I can to try and get some additional funding together for some ideas that we're having around community projects, and trying to get children involved in like post-COVID community program. We've called it improving community environments. So really, trying to get children actively involved in work in their communities to not only do something really, really productive and appropriate for those children, but also to just raise the profile and change the perception of these children in the local community and do some good. The problem is there's no money out there to do that. So I've been looking at sort of grant funding and through sort of the philanthropy approach to see whether there's anything out there so that we can start to fund this project. The problem is, you know, we're nearly into June and these kids need something in September. So I just wish I'd sort of started that a little bit earlier, and that was something that had come to mind 2 months ago rather than 2 weeks ago.
Okay, I mean, that's interesting. So you're saying, so it's not about getting them back in and making sure they catch up, and there's a bigger story there in terms of the community. You said that the perception of these kids in their community, giving them something valued and a sense of being part of something that's growing and reconstructing. I like that. Yeah,
there's a project in New York called Publicolor. I don't know if you've come across it, but essentially what Publicolor does is it brightens up urban environments in New York. It's wonderful if you go and look at it. You just Google Publicolor and you'll see it. Schools, playgrounds, community areas, and it's all done through community interest, if you like. And it was just something that we thought might be really, really interesting. And I've started a few conversations with a few people about what that might look like practically. But to take some children who would otherwise be almost left with nothing, and continue a level of support that they wouldn't get anywhere else. So some of the kids that we work with will struggle to make that transition over a normal 6 to 8 week summer holiday anyway, and they'll struggle to come back in September into a college environment. But if you can imagine, this is unique time because they might not be coming back to September in a normal college environment anyway, and also they'll have not been in school for a couple of months before the summer. So it's trying to keep them engaged and keep them involved in a project that might see some real success and sort of real maturity for them. So I sort of see it like a little bit like an old-fashioned YTS scheme, where they actually get paid and we employ them through a community interest company, and they actually do some work in the community that's funded, and project work, which is where the skill involved, but some real sort of ownership and passion around it. So there's some self-esteem stuff going on there, but also some skills and learning. It's just something that we're looking at now, but the problem is it's just got to be so quick to get something like that in place for September.
I'll have a think if there's anything out there that I'm aware of, and maybe any of the attendees observing might have some thoughts on it.
Yeah, that would be helpful.
Yeah. So, I mean, one of the questions is about the catching up and the closing the gap. And I mean, anything else you want to add with regard to your specific circumstances on that?
Well, I think that the catching, we all know that there's a disadvantage gap anyway, and I think that one of the problems that we've got here is the balance all the time between catching up and health and safety, and this gets back to that leadership thing that we've all been placed in. Is it more important to risk the health and safety, or is it more important to make sure that children don't fall behind? Now, what you could argue is, and this is conversations we have to have with parents to reassure parents. Yes, we've missed a lot. There's a lot of school has been missed. Appreciate that, and and that's really, really difficult. But you know what? Teachers are really good at catching kids up. They're really, really good at working with children and doing really great stuff with them. Also, look how many kids have 2 weeks holiday a year over the course of a lifetime and in school, and how many months that means they miss over a school period, and they don't all of a sudden fall behind and drop off the radar because they've had holidays. I think there's got to be a trust in the system. There's got to be a trust in the staff. There've got to be trust in the schools. The schools are able to make the adjustments. The skilled professionals, they can do that. They're all going to look at their curriculums and look around that sequencing of the curriculum and the knowledge and the understanding of the skills and all the sorts of stuff that has to go in there. And this has been that massive challenge between weighing up the educational impact and the potential for the exposure of to let's face it, a deadly virus, and how do we make those sort of decisions globally? And I think we've got to trust school leaders, and we've got to trust the staff, and we've got to trust the teachers, and they know the kids, the communities, and they know the schools really, really well. We talk about this guidance. Just in the last 10 minutes while we've been sitting here, the secondary school guidance has been published by the DfE on a bank holiday Monday afternoon. So, and another update to the guidance has dropped into my inbox here while I've been sitting at this computer. So now every secondary head teacher in the land now, on their bank holiday Monday afternoon, apart from Andy because he's trapped here, are all going through the secondary guidance now to work out what they've got to do for June the 15th. And it's just crazy, isn't it?
It is a bit. Andy, sorry, we've just spoiled your afternoon. You're looking so relaxed there.
I'm trying to find it now.
So what's your take on? So you're a mainstream school, successful school in Bath. What's your take on this gap and this catching up and all of that?
Yeah, I think this is the divide will increase. I think that's the worry. I think the top 4 year groups, so year 10 and year 12, that will be difficult because it's about some of the curriculum they're going to have to learn. But as Dave says, teachers are professionals. They've done this for a long time, and they'll assess what they don't know. They'll look at the gaps, and that'll have to be filled. And I know this is different, but when I grew up a long time ago, the strikes were on in when I was at school. I missed loads of school, which was great. But I relied on the teachers when I came back to look what happened and put that forward. I think with the 11s and 13s, that is a worry because we've put all these grades in and ranking, and how will the disadvantaged students come out of that? I think that is a worry for me. With 7, 8 and 9, I think from my point of view, it's about that well-being that's missing. And I am desperate, although I'm not going to push any safety rules, to get the children in school before September. If the younger students don't return until September, and it could even be longer, they'll have been out of school for 23 weeks, which is half a year. And we all know that the 6-week holidays, they drop, over that and picking them up again. So I think it's something that schools have to definitely put a lot of energy and focus into when students return. That the students who've been disadvantaged for this, not our fault, I know, but we have to support our students. We've got to put the energy into doing that and looking at what they've learned, what they've not got, and then trying to resource that as much as we can to support them.
I like the trusting the teachers to do they know the kids, know the community, know their stuff, trust a little bit more. But it's not the government, the DfE don't really do trust the teachers in the way that other countries do quite so much. With regard to transition, have you got anything in mind yet for your plans, or is it so fluid that who knows?
I'd love to be that. So the positive thing is the conversations that happen with all the primary schools over a 2-week period can all take place. So they've just been doing with Zoom. So we've got the forms that we've gone through. That's fine. We've lost the interactions into schools, so we've set up a virtual tour and some of the teachers talking to them, and we're trying to get them placed in tutor groups so we can get the tutor group to do a Zoom meeting with the students that are coming in year 6 that are coming up as well. But again, it's like most of the things that are happening is there's a new document in now that Dave just told us there'll be something else in a week. So he's trying to think, I want to do this, but I've got to dance around what's going to be told me in 2 hours' time or tomorrow as well. Okay.
Julie, then, so with regard to the gap and catching up, and then throwing an element of the sort of transition issues as well, what's keeping you up at night with regard to all of that?
Well, I told my parents a few weeks ago that all my teachers are superheroes. And they are. I mean, as Andy and David said, we're so lucky. We've got a profession that are just so dedicated, and my teachers are really waiting to get back. And we've got a curriculum planned which will be aligned with the children at home. So we're back on June the 1st, and we are going for we've risk assessed it to the hilt, but we are going for nursery reception year 1 and year 6 coming back in what we're calling pupil pods, and socially distanced to a certain extent, and following as many of the guidelines as we can, but also ensuring that we're taking in our own context, in our own community, and above everything else, taking on the mental health and well-being of the children. That's my number one priority as well, that those children feel comfortable coming back in school and that they're going to be open to some learning. So the curriculum's going to look very much the same for those who are in school and those who are at home. But obviously those who are in school are going to have their teachers present. So we're hoping there's going to be a little bit more support and direction. But it's going to look nothing like the curriculum that they would be engaging with normally at this time of year. So we're working actually with 2 of our other associates, with Howell and Deborah Kidd and Howell Roberts at the moment, to change our curriculum around for September. Because we want to fill in those gaps, particularly around core subjects, but particularly the knowledge gaps between history and science. We've got what we call a belonging and being curriculum, and it's all about the children having a sense of place in the world. And I'm really keen that, without overloading them, that we tweak our curriculum to make sure that we have given them the best curriculum when they come back. We're not panicking at this stage about filling in all the gaps. At this stage, it's about mental health and well-being. And the recovery curriculum for primary schools that's available on the internet is just beautiful, because these children are going to need time to readjust. And just the attachment issue, they've become so attached now to their families and their parents over this period of time, getting them back into school and readjusting again. You wouldn't do transition like that with children coming into your school, so you've got to take it slowly. Our year 6s, yes, we're fortunate. Many of ours go to the same high school, and we're working very closely with the high school. So there's lots of activities which are planned, both virtually, and we are able to take our children to the school. So I'm really pleased that's an offer from the high school. Do you have
one of the questions that came in on the Q&A with regard to some parents understandably don't want to send their children back?
Yeah.
Do we support them? Do we challenge them? What's the view on that?
We support them. It comes back to what Andy was saying about values, isn't it? And as a values-based head, my professional head is saying, do absolutely everything you can to ensure that this place is safe and secure for these children. But when I reflect personally, I put myself in that position. I've got 2 grown-up daughters, but when they were 3 and 5, would I be rushing to send them back? I feel for the parents, I really do. And I have spent the last week emailing so many parents individually who are asking me my personal opinion and what my views are. And all I can say at the end of the day is they've got the option. They have got the option to not send their children to school. And they've got to make those decisions as parents. And with our school, we have sent out a booking form for this week. They're going to have to book places so we can set up the pods. But equally, if after 1 week they decide they don't want to send their children to school, or the following week they do want to send their children to school, there is that option. I think at this time, we've just got to keep communicating with our own community and support whatever decision they feel is right for their children.
Okay. We talked about values, but also your school is values-based, which is a specific way of working with young people and the community around values. Can you just briefly explain values-based education, and then, more importantly, how it has helped you have the strength as a community and as a school within that community to deal with this challenge?
Yes, we were part of the values-based education movement, which Dr. Neil Hawkes really leads in the UK. And as a values-based school, we very much base everything we do around our core values that we've decided on in the school. So we have 11 key values that our whole curriculum is based on, but everything in our school is related to that. But I guess the main premise of it being a values-based school is that everybody is a leader without title within that school and a role model for the expectations on the children. There's only one rule in school, and that's no shouting, and everybody adheres to that.
Golden rule.
And that shows the children that it's about a partnership. Our behaviour policy is just based on one circle of expectation where the children take responsibility for their own behaviour. We do not have set down sanctions. We do not have set down rules. It's about the children having that dialogue, that restorative justice curriculum. It's about an optimum learning environment. One, we create a climate of delight for the children to be in, one where they are curious, where their own learning, they follow their own learning patterns. It's an exciting place to be. It's a place where everybody is flourishing together. And that's what I love about the school. Every single member of staff has been on our Zoom calls every Friday, 68 of us. And not one member of staff is saying, I don't support what we're doing as a values-based school. I think that's what we do really, really well. We create that community, that sense of passion, and we ask the question, what is the purpose of what we're being asked to do? So things like, what is the purpose of marking? We don't mark children's books. We give them verbal feedback. We teach the children how to accept feedback so that they can improve. We really celebrate intrinsic motivation. It's all of those things and more. There's a school dog, there's peer massage, there's so many tools to support the values-based ethos. But I think fundamentally, it's our children are going to be the leaders in the future of this world, and we want to make sure that, you know, we give them that diet of values, and so that they can make the right choices and take responsibility.
It's thinking longer term, isn't it? So there's an immediate crisis, but these children will become the adults leading the world for the next crisis, whatever that might be, climate probably. And the things that we do now in these next few weeks and months will have a long-term impact on the sort of society that we end up with in 5, 10, 20 years. And I think it's so much more important than the immediate short-term SAT results or whatever it might be. And I know you said your SAT results isn't something you really care about, but your SAT results shot up when you got rid of marking with no written feedback. Your SAT results went through the roof. So I think that you're not allowed to touch their books anyway at the moment, are you? So you're ready for that. Kindness. I want to come back to kindness. I'll start with you, Julie. How are you going to practice kindness? And is kindness one of your values, Julie? I think it probably is.
Totally. One of our strap lines that we use all the time comes from J.M. Barrie, which is always be kinder than necessary.
So how are you going to practice that? And I'm aware you had the situation with like children running up to see when they saw you in the playground, running up to, and you didn't want to frighten them off by saying, no, don't touch, and just share some of the things you're doing. And then I'll come back to Dave on this. Okay, so I think kindness has been shown throughout, first of all. I think the relationships that the teachers have had, and when I say teachers, I mean all of my staff, being part of the Zoom calls with the children and just seeing the teachers' emotions within those Zoom calls as they relate to each of their children. It's been so exciting. And every day, the teachers have been reading stories to them, and there's been a lot of virtual contact with the children. And individual comments that have been made on work that's been submitted and so forth. But the way that we've decided to greet the children when we come back is just by using
our palms together in the namaste look, because what we want to say to the children. I was very worried when I went into the hub, and all these children came towards me because they used to have a hug, and I just wanted a way of not putting my hands up and saying stop. So we decided to use namaste as a way, because it means I respect you, you respect me. The core of it is about really respecting the core of somebody else. So we've taught all the children that. The other thing that we've taught them is bubble. So arms out wide, and as soon as we say bubble, they know that they've just got to check, making sure that nobody's there. But from bubble, give themselves a self-hug. And self-hugging is just so important. So there'll be a lot of mindfulness activities, a lot of group work around that. So we'll be modelling that, and yeah,
and
hopefully that will.
What's the dog called again? Your school dog?
Bailey.
Bailey. And Bailey has such a huge role to play in your school. I know your school was hit by a real tragedy in the bereavement of your deputy 2 years ago now, I think, and it plays such a huge role in bringing everybody together. What's the school's dog role in all of this? Dogs can't get COVID, cats can, but dogs can't, apparently.
So Bailey will be back and present, visiting the classrooms, and just for the children to just see Bailey, be with Bailey. And he's just such a reassuring dog. He's a huge dog. He's a Labradoodle. So for some of our younger children, it's like having a horse approach him, but he's their constant. And he's got his own little Facebook page that the children follow, and wonderful to have that presence back in the school when we go back. Children will really appreciate that.
Okay, thank you. Andy, kindness and care and nurturing, and with an absence of human contact, what's the secondary's view on that, the plan for that? It's not. It's not something. Whenever I see any recommendations coming from the government and some of their people, those things aren't on the radar. Love, care, kindness, nurture. They don't seem to be the things that are important from that perspective, but they are.
They are indeed. I just want to say, Julie, your school sounds amazing.
Go and visit.
If I get an offer, I will.
But it's safe.
So yeah, it tells me when I'm trying to work through the plans of can children come back to school in the 10s and 12s, and it just said to me that kindness thing straight away is whoa at a distance, and that sort of thing. It's unconsciously you're giving off just a totally vibe is you're dangerous, stay away from me, which is total anti to what schools are. I love the self-hug, Julie. I think that's a great idea. But I've been doing sort of assemblies that are filmed, and it has been talking about that when you come into school, we may say you have to stay away. It's not that we, how that's taken is that we want to be near you, but obviously these are the social distancing rules that we've got. But I think that our school as well is built on the values, and everyone who comes to it say it's got a real family feel, and I love that about the school. It's people who come for interviews want to come and work. Is another job, can I come work there? Because it has got that community, and the staff are amazing, and that will come across if they're back with them. I think that will be taken for granted, can't be taken for granted. And we're looking at our recovery curriculum again, which is well-being and about how their feelings and how we get through how they have had to experience this. And however they are experiencing it is right for them. That their own situation, their own feelings are fine, but then we can work together and sort of bring them back. I also want to know how you get a school dog, because we're after one. Believe it or not, we've got chickens, ducks, pygmy goats and pigs, but the risk assessment on those is much easier than a dog. And we've used the farm actually with lots of vulnerable students and bringing them in. And the children who won't come in will come and have an hour down the farm, and then they'll have a quick chat with the teacher, and then they'll go off again. But I don't think kindness can be underestimated at all on how we come out of this. And we've all done it together as adults and youngsters.
Yeah, okay, lovely. Thank you for that. I love animals in a school. I've just seen so many examples where the child who isn't necessarily strong anywhere in the school suddenly finds his or her strength with the animals, with nature. It's so powerful. If I just tell Andy,
we've go through Dogs Helping Kids, which is a charity down in Devon, and I'd recommend anybody who's thinking about having a school dog, please go through a charity like Dogs Helping Kids. They're a values-based charity, and Bailey's had to go through 7 assessments to be an official school dog. Please don't ever just bring a school dog in. Make sure you do it properly.
Dave, kindness. We started with you and kindness. One of the most moving things you ever told me, Dave, was the situation that you've had in your schools where you will be restraining a child in the appropriate way because that child had lost it, and that restraint would last for however long it lasted, and then would eventually become a hug. And it was imperceptible, the change, but that's what it ended up, from a restraint to a hug. And that just stayed with me. I still find that very moving. How does that work? How does that level of getting into kids' minds and getting them on side, how's that going to work in this current climate of distance?
I think, well, it's a huge challenge, isn't it? Because obviously that proximity thing in special schools, particularly when there's a behaviour challenge, is huge. And just that reassuring safe touch as well, reassuring safe touch that we use a lot in special schools, perfectly appropriate and right to use. And that's just, not going to be there, is it? I think what's really interesting, Ian, if you don't mind me just picking up this thing around sort of behaviour, we're going back to the guidance here, God, I love a bit of guidance. One of the things it said in the guidance was there's like tick lists and checklists that they put in the guidance. You need to do this, you need to check this, you need to make sure you've got this, you need to make. And one of them was about readjusting your behaviour policy. And I thought, well, okay, readjust it. You've got to adjust and change your behaviour policy ready for children to come back, because now there might be some children who have got some anxieties. Well, surely if your behaviour policy was good enough in the first place, it wouldn't need changing for when children come back from a crisis. And then I saw on Twitter saying, has anybody got any example policies that they can share? Can people please share your new updated behaviour policies for people returning from this crisis? And people are starting to list their new sanctions associated with things like children coughing and spitting at each other. And I'm just sitting there thinking, what is all this about? All of a sudden as well, people are starting to say, we probably need to start learning a little bit about trauma, because we're going to have some children. You've had children in your schools that have been through trauma for decades, forever. But all of a sudden now, because it's public, you now want to do something on trauma. And I know that sounds a little bit harsh, but for me, the great schools that are out there actually won't need to change the behaviour policies, because the behaviour policies will work. And as Julie just said, that behaviour policy, I bet Julie's not changing her behaviour policy for the return of children, but you have thousands of schools in the land are creating new lists of sanctions to be associated with COVID crimes, my fear is that we're just losing the focus. Forget COVID crimes and just start being kind. So okay, if you weren't kind before, then start kind. If you need any help with that, give me a shout, because then what we'll do is we'll look at how we can get people into your school to look at how we can be trauma informed and trauma aware, and that pretty much starts with being kind and building your relationships. And it just, I find it fascinating, Ian, when I see these huge changes that schools are having to make just to welcome children back. And I imagine these assistant heads of pastoral or sitting, because they've been told by the head teacher to rewrite their behaviour policy, and they're sitting at home thinking, right, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to put a load of sanctions in for if a kid spits at another kid and says, there you go, you've got COVID now. And it's, well, anyway, don't get me going.
I like it when you get angry, Dave. I like it. Yeah, the schools are, we can only use every other booth 2 meters apart. So
well, I mean, let's face it. Booths are perfect for social distancing, aren't they? I mean, just let's get more of them and space them out.
Yeah, big screens around.
Yeah.
Well, okay, we've got just under 5 minutes. What, in terms of what might have changed going forward? I know Andy's already talked about how technology and blended learning is going to be a significant part of learning, and I've said the same here for my wife's school in Rotterdam. Dave, for you, what do you hope might be a longer term change across the education system as a result of what we've all gone through?
Right, I hope that Ofsted back off for a while, and I hope that people see that what is a great school and what's a successful school is not currently what people see as a great school and a successful school. And I hope that that this concept of the regulator, okay, and I think the regulator of schools needs to take a long hard look at themselves around how schools have coped over this period and how they're going to make a difference going forward, and to recognise how education may change and how we need to be judged. I'm not against regulation. Please don't anybody think that we're not on accountability. I'm absolutely all for it. but I just think it has to be contextual more. And I think this is a massive realisation for everybody about the importance that schools play in their communities. And you know, I'll be quite happy to be part of the blob. You know, if that's what it takes, then so be it. Because schools aren't just about education. They are a whole lot more than that. And I think this has been a period of time where everybody has appreciated that. And you know, leaders in schools and teachers in schools and all the staff have become community leaders. You know, they're holding the communities together, and they haven't stopped working since we were told to shut schools. They haven't stopped working, and they're still there, and they're just working in a different way. And I think that schools need recognition for that, and that needs to be taken into account in the months and years to come when we're judging schools and the importance of schools in the communities.
Okay, thank you for that. Andy, same question for you really. What going forward beyond the technology? What do you think? What would you like to have changed?
I can't argue with much what Dave said actually. Hey, are you from Barnsley, Dave? Is that right? Did I read that?
I'm actually here we go for everybody from Pontefract originally. Live in Doncaster, work in Barnsley, and all over the place.
Very good.
I grew up in Kunigsborough and Wath. Sorry for everyone else, that's very, very local. But yeah, I think Ofsted and how what you are accountable for, I think could change the face of education in itself. I think sometimes we do, you know, the values, the figures that we go for misses a lot of what schools are about. And if there is ever a time, as Dave said, to look at how we are judged and what we do in the communities, this is actually a valuable time. And none of this sort of teacher bashing that we've seen in the papers, you know, about we're catching up on box sets or things like that. You know, we all know in the schools that we work in that people have had about 2 days off since it all started in April.
Yeah.
And in those days off that we've had, we've been thinking about what we're doing. So I think that would be a good move, yeah. But I think for me as well, I want to let it settle, and I want to think about it more, because there is that long-term plan. But right now we all probably are dealing with a document that's come out at 4 o'clock, and we've got to read that. Yeah. And if you've ever read 50 pages of attachments to every single email that comes, this is the time that we've done it. I think we're the best well-read people around.
Okay, thank you very much. We're right up against the clock. But last word from you, Julie, in a nutshell. What will have changed?
What needs to change is to value our community and to value the greatest resource we have in our school, which is our teachers. So I'm plugging a 4-day week, slightly longer days, 4 days a week. None of this staff meeting at 4 o'clock on a Wednesday afternoon when the teachers are on their knees. Let's make Friday PPA day, professional development day. Let's really value our teachers, and let's give families back their times. And for those families who need to work, yes, we can provide childcare on a Friday, but let's think differently about our work-life balance and make our communities just great places to be.
That sounds good. I like the sound of that very much. That's, wow, that hour went quick. Dave and Andy and Julie, thank you ever so much. I'm always in awe when I spend time listening to people who are at the front end, at the sharp end, doing it and doing it differently and doing it with their values intact. So thank you ever so much for sharing that. Good luck with everything going forward in the short term and longer term. Thank you to all the attendees. Remember, NHS Relief Project, or Winston's Wish, or Big Issue, or RSPB took a bit of money in their bucket for this session. I'm in independentthinking.co.uk or at ITL Worldwide. You can get us there, check out the website, and Independent Thinking Press books as well. Lots of ways you can make contact, lots of ways we can keep on supporting you in whatever happens next. In the meantime, I think Nina's going to flick the switch, but thank you very much. Thank you.